Morning all, let's have a look at quite an exciting, if not mega exciting, game from round 2 of the Sinquefield Cup. Levon Aronian playing white against Veselin Topalov. Kicked off with d4, so Levon playing white, d4. We have Slav defense, very popular at the high levels of chess. It doesn't hem in this bishop, so as a kind of upgrade to the old Queen's Gambit declined. Knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, and black refuses to either move the bishop here or hem it in. There's another move available, which is the third most popular move in the position, a6. Now, okay, here, if the bishop moves, I think this is equal. Often players are closing in the bishop with e3. This holds on to the pawn straight off the bat now, because black might be threatening to munch that pawn in b5. So it seems safe and solid to play e3. b5, so provoking white to close the position. If white plays c takes d, I have a suspicion this is fine for black, this kind of position. You can see that black might be using that c4 square later when getting pressure on the c file. So I don't think that's too much for white. So white actually elects to close the position, although this suffers from potentially e5 or the pawn chain being undermined later if e5 is carried out. We see g6, so the bishop points potentially at d4. Bishop d2, a curious move. What is my book saying about this position? Usually knight e5 is played here. I think this hems in this knight because there's knight c6, if knight e7. So knight e5 is the most common there. Let's carry on. Bishop d2, bishop g7. So b4, I guess the idea is that the bishop, by moving there, the queen is protecting the rook. So white can think about a4, maybe, and then try and use that pin on the a6 pawn. So black reacts here with a quick a5. But now b takes a5 is played. If the rook takes, then I think tactically we can exploit this, or can we? Maybe not. No, queen is protecting that rook, so I was just wondering about a knight attack. But maybe just a4 and white's okay there. Instead, the black knight played knight e4. Now, white took this, takes knight g5. What to do about e4? It seems very awkward actually if f5 is played, because that diagonal looks extremely weak here. Let's have a quick look. If f5, queen b3, that looks pretty nasty. Queen d5, actually white can take the queen off here and play bishop takes b5, and this is very good for white. White's got that pawn still, and it seems not very convincing for black to do this. Any knight chase, the knight can come back maybe here. It's horrible. Alright, so here, queen d5, I think this is the only move really for black, to play queen d5 in the circumstance. I mean, e5, this is interesting, but knight takes e4 threatens knight d6 check. So, I think this is not so good. Castle d takes, that should be okay for white, from an engine perspective anyway. So, queen d5. And we see now Levon playing f4, an interesting move. First of all, okay, by playing f4, e5 break is clamped down. If e takes en passant, I don't think this is too good for white after knight takes f3. I mean, not too good for black, I mean. If castle's here, this looks very comfortable after queen b3. So, after f4, in fact, Topalov played a tactical idea. This is very interesting, because sometimes in forcing moves and combinations, it can act as a virtual positional sacrifice for the side which is on the receiving end. So here we see a forcing move, which by the way doesn't imply that there's just one move available not to have an advantage or anything. It's nothing to do with an advantage. It's nothing to do with one move available. It's actually just the act of restricting the opponent's option. So h6, where is the knight going? It's limiting the opponent's options. So knight h3, and now another forcing move, and now that's the only move ready to recapture. And we get a very interesting move now, which is forcing in nature. I wonder if you can spot it. So black to play, Topalov to play, and can you assess the resulting positions? No, just kidding about that. If I give you 5 seconds, can you see what surprise move black played? Okay, this is why I thought this is quite exciting, this game. Bishop takes d4. It is limiting white's options here. It's attacking the rook. It really, if the rook moves, I don't think this is particularly good. Let's have a quick look at the rook moving. Just bishop f6. I don't think white's got too much of a good position here. After queen b3, e6. This looks very nice for black. Okay, so really it should be taken, and the queen on d5 is actually doing a good job here now. After e3, it seems to be a double attack here. So decision time. If the rook moves here, let's have a look at this position. Actually, believe it or not, there's a better move than e takes d2. What would you play here if I give you 5 seconds? So let's play like the master, or the computer here. Play like the computer. It's a variation. This didn't happen. Rook g1 didn't happen. But black has a strong move here. Very strong move. Not taking, actually. Even better than taking, because this is... Okay, it's slightly better for black, but even better is actually queen takes d4. That's horrible. So say this takes, white's looking a bit vulnerable. Check. And actually we can take on c5, so the whole pawn chain's been obliterated. Black is ready to castle. Okay, so anyway, in this position, yeah, I thought this was a fun game. White now took, so basically it ends up being a kind of, you could argue the queen's out of play, so you could argue it's some sort of deep-seated positional sacrifice by Levon Aronian, but was it? I'm not really sure. Maybe he just misplayed it, and he fell into this position, so he's got to make the most out of it. The queen's slightly misplaced here. He wants the castle really, and he wants to protect a5, so queen d2 helps both. It protects a5 and he can castle queenside. So the next move here from black, you'd think maybe getting the queen back could be a good idea, but I don't know, if the queen goes back immediately, bishop g2 is annoying, and you know, there's already evidence for some compensation with d5. It looks as though black is slightly vulnerable here. Topalov dared to leave the queen on h1. He actually played knight a6, and actually the engines like either e6 at a certain depth or knight a6. So what's the point? Well, the bishop's pinned at the moment anyway, so it's not critical to do anything about bishop g2, but now it is, surely. It's unpinned, bishop g2 is on the cards. The queen does flee now. White is threatening bishop g2. It looks very painful, especially the c6 pawn is vulnerable. So queen d5, bishop g2. And here, let's imagine the queen goes to f5 or e6. The queen in the game went to c4, so let's have a look at some variations here. If the queen goes to e6, surely we're just asking for d5. This looks good. This is like pulverizing black. Surely, yeah, you see that's horrible. If we win back the exchange, we've also got queen d7, and it's pretty nasty. Yeah, you don't want this position. So basically, what about queen f5? Surely c6 just drops. We just take on c6. So queen c4 check was played, and it's got an idea. Well, the engine had the right follow-up here, but it's crazy the follow-up for black to survive this position is slightly crazy, but it seems engines, well, on depth 20 slightly favour black here, believe it or not. If black played check. Now why is this? Well, the first point to note is actually white doesn't want to play queen takes here to try and exploit c6, because the reverse is going to happen. c6 is protected, c6 is protected still, and black's better. No, white would play king a1 here to try for an advantage, and white's still threatening d5, and there's no time to take on d2 because we've got bishop takes c6, and we've got adequate compensation for the exchange, these two passed pawns. Okay, so in this position though, it seems here after check king a1 that there is a possibility, and it seems ludicrous, but the engine suggestion is that black might be okay. It's not something a human would do here. I wonder if you can spot a good move for black from an engine perspective. c6 seems to be a major issue, so what do you do about c6? Brute force calculation. Okay, you probably said like something like rook c8. Thing is, d5, white's still looking quite comfortable here. If c takes, then bishop takes d5. I think there's trouble brewing for black here. If castles, white's actually better. Bishop b7, ouch. That knight on a6 is a tactical target, it seems. But actually, the engine gives, in this position, a ridiculous looking move, king d7. I can't believe black isn't blasted out of sight. Well, the queens are looking at each other, so maybe that's why. That forms basis that my d5, there's an immediate queen d2 to get the queens off. If there isn't d5, I mean, let's say we try and play queen c2, then queen takes a5, and apparently, well, then there's knight b4. So d5, knight b4, counterattack on a2. Chess is really complicated, isn't it? In this position also, you'll note that actually king c7 is even possible. This bishop's not really going to be torturing the king. Rook d7, king c8, and then actually black has got play on a2 here to get the queens off at least. And in fact, this is a loose piece after, so white's actually busted here. So it seems the strange computer move, king d7, in this particular position. Each position carries its own rules and logic, which dictate really the best play. It seems this ludicrous looking move is actually the strongest move, based on pure calculation. Because black is, if the queen moves, then black is about to use the a file. So d5, black can take here. And now we can flip in d takes, but apparently king c7, and then in this position rook a d8, black is the exchange up. c5 looks potentially vulnerable. White's best apparently is to play check at certain depths, and knight b4, and black is, you know, looking as though this is surviving now. If the knight can reroute like that, you see that black can claw back into this position, the exchange up. So it's incredible to think that actually this move king d7 after queen b4 check was the way to go for this game in this position. I don't know what GMs think about this when they look at the game's computers after, and I don't know what Topalov would have thought about this. I mean, if we try and move the queen over here, I don't think it makes any difference. Black's just taking here a knight b4. The d5 break is just ineffectual, it seems. Even the double check, which is king c8, it's not so easy to get at the black king. So anyway, in the game though, fortune seemed to smile with queen e6 being played instead of this check. Queen e6 now is already giving white a promising position now after d5. It seems as though white's got huge pressure. Queen f5 check, king b2. There's no danger for that a pawn or this a file being shredded against white's king. Now strangely, the game really takes a strange turn of events here now. it seems actually white's advantage in terms of positional compensation isn't too gigantic if black castles kingside. Not sure what Topalov would have been so worried about here concretely. If d6, I think we can just snap off on c5, and then we've even got knight a4. If takes here, we've got check, takes, and black will be better. If d takes c6, I don't think the same sort of thing, or knight c7. This might have been. It looks as though white's got a nice position here. Black doesn't want to give up 2 rooks for a queen. I don't think that would be particularly helpful to play this here. Although, I don't know, even this position might be about equal apparently. But anyway, so to cut a long story short, it seems castling kingside isn't mega dangerous for black. But Topalov castled queenside, and I think a lot of commentators were shocked by this decision, both during the game and after the game. Is the king really safe there? Now Levon plays d6. It's a supported pawn. Maybe there's some sort of element of miscalculation here. With the king on the c-file, knight c5 is not actually viable here. Bishop takes, and white now is careful to insert d7. It's protected by queen and rook here, and then play rook c1. And it would seem in this position that white is doing exceptionally well holding on to that pawn on d7. Very good compensation for the exchange, probably winning for white. So after d6, knight c5 might not be brilliant if white just takes. Topalov played e takes d6, and we saw c takes, which liberates this bishop. These bishops actually look rather scrumptious together here for my intuitive eyes in this position. Check might not be the best either. I don't know what to suggest. In fact, that's the top engine move now. Something is broken in black's position after this. 1 second. Instead of ed, what can black do? Knight c5 was mentioned. Queen d7. Is this so grim here? It looks very defensive for black. Black's prospects, that knight seems stranded. No pressure on c5. Engine choice here is bishop f3 to carry on with queen g2 to torture c6. Good idea. Great idea, bishop f3. If king b7, queen d3, we can still torture the pinned pawn with queen takes b5 threatened. Here it starts to get nasty. So here, queen e4 and double attack time. So you can see that the bishops are exerting a lot of pressure on black. And here, for example, it's starting to look like big position for white. Even the exchange down scenarios, if a rook comes to the 7th, then it starts to get nasty like this, for example. So okay, it was a difficult position, but I think it's been made worse by queen f6. This actually, after king b1, it seems to be worse now. Technically, check was played, and no, it's not perpetual check time. White avoids it with king c1, keeping loads of threats now. c6 is vulnerable. Queen c3, so there's bishop c6, there's queen c3, and there's also bishop b6 to factor in. Queen f6 was played, and a weakness of that last move is actually the d7 square is less protected, and white now plays d7 check. Yes, the queen was threatening maybe check, but this is extinguished with tempo now with bishop d4, and there's no checks available. So what is white up to here? Well, white's actually skewering queen and rook. That's bad news. If queen e6 was played, one else After queen e6, bishop takes, black resigned, Topalov resigned. Very strange game. Seemed like a tactical backfire. If takes here, we can just queen the pawn. Surely that's pretty good. Just queening is good enough. We can get a knight fork as well to force rook takes. So that's end of game there, really. And there's even stronger move technically, queen d4, queen b6. Okay, what on earth happened here? Really, doesn't matter where the queen goes. Just bishop takes h8. Strange game. What I did want to comment on a few days ago, but there were some other games as well to look at. So it seems, if we go back and have a look, innovative opening play from Topalov to try and get white to close the position or release the tension with CD. White closes the position. We have this forcing continuation, and they're often difficult to assess. You think you're playing a brilliant combination, but what happens at the end of it? If the opponent's got pressure at the end of the combination, it's not so practical, shall we say. And here, yes, this triggers off a combination basically from black to play h6, to take here, to take here, to take here. But what happens at the end of that? It's like white's bishops seem to be quite good. It needs like very computer-like moves after to survive the pressure, the exchange up here. But it did seem that was available. But yeah, with queen b4 and king d7. But on queen e6, things were made worse though, and I think this is the one which is more difficult for commentators to understand. Not the queen b4, king d7, but just not castling kingside here. So this seems the safer proposition. I guess after d takes c6, maybe Topalov didn't like this, wanted to jazz things up or something. I don't know. But yeah, I mean it's still difficult for black here. White has that a pawn. Apparently this continuation might be somehow okay for white. But yeah, in castling queenside, that seems to be asking for trouble. The king's a liability in relation to the pawns. White got out of the checks, and actually here, very dangerous position. And this skewer, actually, so not even attention on the queen side, just skewering for that pawn to be dangerous. Okay, interesting game there. Weird stuff. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.